Are you buying or selling a home soon? If so, stick around, because today the Mo Real Estate team is talking with Jimmy Torres of Walkabout Inspections about the things that he does when he performs a home inspection. So Jimmy, we're outside the house here. You probably start in the exterior.
Always.
What sort of things are you looking for outside a home here?
Yeah, well, one of the first things that I noticed is that the downpipe from the gutter up above doesn't have an extension going into the lower roof area.
Yeah.
And what happens there is the concentrated water runoff ends up speeding up the wear and tear on those shingles.
On those shingles, okay. Yeah, that's a good tip. What about the roof here? This is about a 15-year-old cedar roof.
Yeah, so with cedar roof shingles, what we're looking at is if you notice how some areas are cupping, those are signs that the natural wear and tear is coming.
Yeah.
And when you do have that, it's not all going to wear and tear at the same time. You might have some in different areas, and then usually you'll want a roof repairman to come in and spot check those areas.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Well, let's walk over here and take a look.
Sounds good.
So one thing we were talking about before we started shooting this was flashing around windows and stuff, and we noticed, or I noticed, that this does not have the flashing.
Correct. Now, there's an exception to this, all right? What you'll notice is that we have large overhang here. So when you have large overhang, there's definitely no water coming through, Scott, and that's the reason why the builders didn't bother putting the flashings.
Overkill, you don't need it.
Yeah. Now, when you do have exposed areas and there's no overhang at all, that's when you definitely want to have it.
Right, okay, perfect. So Jimmy, the other thing you talk about a lot is vegetation on the exterior of the building. What sort of things are you looking for out there?
Definitely. So first thing is here, I mean, if you notice at one point or another, this was probably trimmed back because all this tree overhanging is creating a lot of debris, especially when the fall season comes. All that's getting into the gutter system and then it's clogging up the drainage system, right? Another thing too is we're looking at how close the tree was planted and where it's situated as to the foundation. What happens there is you don't want any roots pushing up against the foundation, compromising the structure of your building.
Right, okay. The other thing you see probably in attics and stuff is rodents, and I think that's another way for them to get up on trees.
That's definitely one of the first ways as well. And you know, once we're actually done in the exterior, first place I go to is in the attic to make sure that we don't see anything like that as well.
Right, yeah. Perfect. Good, well let's head around the backyard and take a look back there.
Sounds good.
So, concrete on the exterior walkways.
Yeah, so Scott, one of the fundamental building principles is to have the grading and the sidewalks sloping away from the property.
Right.
Especially because we're in BC, it rains a lot here, and the last thing that you want is water going into the property, right? We want it sloping away, making sure that your property is all nice and dry.
Yeah, and we over the years we've seen many houses that have the walkway sloping in and water issues in the basement and stuff. So
definitely,
that's a good tip for sure. Okay. The other stuff on this home we noticed. There's a rat trap there, so obviously, I mean, we're outside.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some rodents. Is that a concern? I mean,
yes, obviously it is. I mean, you don't want to have any rodents going into the property.
Right.
Now, do keep in mind, it is the exterior where we're situated. There's a lot of forest and nature around, so that's going to happen. So if you're doing your due diligence and being proactive, having traps around, that definitely would work in your favor. Do keep in mind that during the home inspection process, some home inspectors, depending who you choose, may not look for that because it's not in the home inspection standards of practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Over here, we got some drainage downspout here. We noticed that it's kind of disconnected a little bit there.
Yeah, exactly. So as I was mentioning earlier, the downspout that was going and not extending into the gutter, what happens here is we actually have it discontinued. It's not following all the way through into the ground there.
Right.
Now, when we see this, what we always recommend is not having it on the ground anyway. We recommend putting it onto an elbow, onto a splash block, and letting it actually drain onto the property. Yeah, away from the property as well. Because if you notice here, there's a lot of debris already building up in there.
Right.
And the last thing that you want is having a drainage blocked.
Right, okay. Yeah, good point, okay. Okay, well, outside here, we're noticing the plug has got a couple little buttons on there. If people aren't familiar with what that is, what is that, Jimmy?
That's called the GFCI outlet, ground fault circuit interrupter. Now, the reason why we have that on the exterior, Scott, is because we're exposed to weather, rain. And when it's open just the exact same way like it is right here, what will happen is if water does get into that electrical outlet, it will automatically stop. So I have the test button here. This would act as if it were water coming in, and watch what happens. Boom.
Right.
stops the power there immediately, and then to get it turned back on, you hit the reset button, and we're back in business.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So we're over here in this back patio area, and we noticed some dirt and stuff. We looked up, and what do we have? A nest.
Yeah, bird's nest. And so what we're looking at here, I mean, there's not really too much that it's going to be doing to you unless you don't like having, you know, pests.
Yeah, a little bit of a mess and whatnot.
One of the things though that we do look for is if there's any opening in the soffit ventings. The reason why is because sometimes it's loose, and that is openings for birds, rodents, wasps to get in and start nesting, and then that's the last thing you want, is it actually getting into the property.
Right, exactly. Yeah, anything on the interior, in the roof or the attic.
Anything as visible as this can simply be removed either by yourself if you're brave enough, or you can get a pest control guy to take care of that.
Or put up a little webcam there and have like a live bird hatching or whatever.
Yeah, you can do that too.
Yeah. Good. Okay, that's good to know.
All right, so Scott, now what we have here on this deck is an open area. Any deck that actually is 2 feet above ground should have a guardrail that's at least 42 inches high. Okay. I mean, we're out here having a barbecue, enjoying a drink or two, having a conversation like we are right now.
Things happen.
Yeah, next thing you know, fall trip, and then what you have is a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Right?
Gotcha.
So that's what we definitely recommend, is just adding a guardrail here.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, so 2 feet above the ground is kind of where you're, you start to think about that. Okay.
And kids as well, right? Anybody running around, pets, right?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. So now we are inside the home here. Do you have a certain order you like to do the inspection?
So I always start upstairs into the attic and work my way down. The reason being is because the attic is the continuation from the outside. We get to see under the roof side, make sure everything is all good, insulated, ventilated properly, and then we work our way down.
Perfect. Well, let's head upstairs.
All right.
All right, so we're upstairs in the home. We're not climbing the attic today, but you would have checked the attic out first. Now we're into one of those main areas I'm sure you get issues is in the bathroom, and we're in the ensuite here of this home.
Yeah, 100%. So that's another reason why we start from the top, Scott, is because we want to make sure that all the plumbing is all good and the hot water tank is performing in a efficient manner.
Right.
The hot water tank is usually at the most bottomest area of the property. Has to reach all the way to the top floor. That's the reason why we're checking it, make sure hot water comes out in a timely manner. And then what we'll do is we'll end up draining everything, making sure that we don't see any leaks by the time we get to the main floor as well.
Perfect. And what sort of things are you looking for in here? Obviously the plumbing and under the taps.
Yeah, definitely toilet. Under the taps, everything like that. Make sure caulking and everything that is all good. Make sure that the toilet bowl is solid, it's not loose or anything like that. Windows again, and make sure that the ventilation is working, right? Here where we take a shower.
That's a good point. Actually, I've seen a lot of those vents be disconnected in the attic.
Yeah, that's right. And so the thing is that as well is that in the wintertime it gets really cold and we don't use our windows, we don't open them up. So what we want to do still is have the steam have a way to escape. Otherwise you get accumulated moisture in here, and the last thing you want is like mold or your walls having that sweaty look.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And you've got a water meter in your hand there?
That's right. That's what we have here is a moisture meter. And so this will detect moisture behind tiles, right? Tiles are very porous. Well, at least the grout in them. And so notice here, this picks up the moisture from my hand, the blood. So what we'll do is I'll show you how that works over here into the shower.
Sounds good. So all three of us are here in the shower for this video. I have to say it's one of the smallest showers I've ever seen. But yeah, probably fit another 5 people in here. But anyways, you've got your moisture meter in here. I'm sure this is the main point of issues sometimes. What are you looking for
Definitely in here? Is, Scott. So first thing that we do before actually taking this out of the tool bag is I'm looking for any immediate signs. Do we have any mildew growing in between the grout, right? Grout is very porous, so that's why we bring this out. Now when I use this will actually pick up moisture. Notice how that actually beeps on my hand. Right. So when we go over here, notice that. I'm always checking, especially in the bottom areas, because when you're actually done a shower, Scott, what happens is all that water pools around here. Notice we have caulking right here. Right. That's where all the water is very susceptible to getting into and reaching behind your tiles. So as of right now, we're all nice and dry, and we're all good there.
What happens if you put it on the floor?
If we put it on the floor, 9 times out of 10, it will actually show up and beep. So let's actually have a look here. These areas are still dry. Right here, it's a little bit more wet, and that is very expected because the water is now sitting on here. Of course, we do have a slope going into the drain, but again, as I mentioned, grout here is very porous, and it's naturally going to be there. So
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. All right, so we did upstairs. We're now on the main floor in the kitchen. There's got to be a lot of things that could go wrong in the kitchen area.
Yeah, definitely. And so I noticed you said we are on the main floor. We did come up from the from upstairs,
Yep.
and that's the first thing I'm looking at is when we actually hit the main floor. I want to make sure that there's no water stains or any leaks coming out of the pot lights there.
Right.
I've experienced my own leak at my house, and we do have a bathroom above us.
Right.
Sometimes what happens if there's a leak, these would be the first areas where it actually comes out of, right?
Right.
So now once we actually get out of that, we're looking at outlets, switches, and making sure that those are all working fine. This right here should be GFCI. To have this little outlet tester, Scott, tells me exactly how it's wired and if it has any GFCI on it. I'll hit this button.
Yep.
It should trip. It isn't.
Right.
So what that means is that this is not GFCI protected.
Right.
It should be because we are very close to a plumbing fixture here.
Right, gotcha.
Right.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
You got plumbing stuff here. I'm assuming you're going to look underneath here. and-
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the same thing, right? Like, I mean, running the hot water again, making sure that the hot water tank is all good and that there's no leaks here. Carburetor as well, if they do have one.
Yep.
And then right beside it, over here. Yep, go ahead. And that's all fine. What we're actually doing with the carburetor, we're actually going inside, making sure it's not all rusted. Carburetor, all that aluminum in there definitely eats up and absorbs a lot of water and will get rusted over time.
Right, okay.
Right beside you over here, Scott, we have the dishwasher. Now,
Do you guys test all appliances, or?
I do. Some home inspectors don't, and the reason is because it actually doesn't fall under the standards of practice for home inspections.
Interesting,
So
okay.
it's very important that you do get a home inspector who will check them.
Right.
So I do a full run on these, and again, I want to make sure that the plumbing connections are all good,
Yep.
that there's no leak by the time we get to the basement, if there is one here, and that there's no surface leaks. So
Right, I guess
Yeah.
what, run the moisture thing
Yeah,
on the floor and stuff like that. Looks like gas stove here.
yeah, so I mean, this is pretty straightforward. We just want to make sure that, our gas lines are working. So always test these and make sure that we see the flame. Obviously, we're also looking and using our sense of smell, make sure that there's no any leaking gas, right?
Right.
So that's all fine. Then above us here, we also have the hood fan and the lights right here, right? So,
Yeah.
oh, this is like a high-tech one over here. So
Yeah.
there you go.
There you go. And I've seen it where the vent has not been connected also on these to the
Correct,
outside, so
correct,
it's just
yeah.
kind of pumping air back into the kitchen?
Definitely, and so what happens is, I mean, we do make a note of that in the report of whether or not it's actually direct vented to the exterior or whether or not they're just relying on the charcoal filter.
Right, gotcha. Okay, good. Fridge, stove, or oven
again,
or anything?
Yeah, I mean, refrigerator. This is always the funny part in the inspection. When I'm showing this to the clients, I just go, you know what? The fridge is refrigerating and the freezer's freezing. There's not really much anything else that you can tell, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's leaking or something, right?
Yeah.
Every cupboard. Now, believe it or not, in the home inspection standards of practice, the home inspector only has to check one cupboard in the kitchen as a representative amount for the cupboards and drawers. Now, I check every single one because I have kids, and sometimes a homeowner might have one that's broken. They never got to fixing it, and they just kind of work around it.
Right.
The last thing that you want is opening this up and it's actually falling on you or your child.
Yeah.
So I check every single one.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Good to know. All right, well, if we're done in the kitchen, I guess we'll head down to the basement where we got the furnace and
Yeah.
the hot water and all that fun stuff.
Get to the mechanics.
Let's go.
All right.
All right, we're down in the basement here. We're looking at the hot water, furnace area. What sort of things are we looking for in here?
Yeah, now just before we get to that, Scott, what you'll notice here is that in these mechanical areas, about 9 times out of 10, we have this exposed structure right here.
Right.
And the reason why I point that out is because since 90% of the house is covered in drywall, we can't actually see what's going on behind there. So these are the first areas that we're looking at, making sure there's no water stains or anything active because we do have plumbing running through here.
Right.
So if you see, that is all good and we are all dry. Now, getting to the actual mechanics, Scott, what we have here is our main water shutoff. That red valve right there will turn off the water to the entire property.
Okay, good to know that, yeah.
Right beside us over here, we have the hot water tank. Hot water tanks are generally 8 to 12 years in lifespan. Okay, people say 10 years, that sounds about right.
Right.
So everything here is all good. What we recommend here is having some strapping actually attached to the studs here. Reason being is because this is on a gas line, and in the situation earthquake, we want to make sure that that's all stable and not.
What sort of things, like I've seen houses where there's like dripping and stuff. Is that like when you kind of know the hot water tank's kind of on its last legs?
Not necessarily, but yes, right? I mean, it's a science. So what happens here is we do have a drip tray here. Now this will catch any water that's coming through, and a lot of times you can't see what's going on because there's a chamber in here, and all that material ends up getting rusted over time with all that water. So what you will see is water coming out and rust marks like we do right here.
Right.
So definitely a sign, but if it's your first time seeing it, what we usually recommend is getting a specialist in here to do further investigation.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
And now with
Furnace.
our furnace. So this one in particular has a heat pump. So what that does, it actually allows the furnace to not work as hard. All right? This is helping the house keep cool and warm. And when we actually do the inspection, Scott, I'm going into every room, checking every heat register, making sure that the airflow or the heat is coming out properly. Sometimes ducts are disconnected in between the walls and stuff, and we can't see that, right?
Right, okay.
So that's what we're checking there. If we see any rust flakes or any drips from condensation, again, that'd be something that we'd recommend to a specialist to get further investigation on.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, so we're still in the basement here, and in your hand you've got an infrared thermal camera. Sounds like a fancy thing here.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So what this does is it actually shows the temperature differential. So what you notice here, Scott, is you can see the heat coming in from the light. The light there, and that's all bright orange. And then right beside us we have the cool air coming out of the heat register from the heat pump, and that's all blue.
Right.
So that allows us to also see if there's any leaks from above.
Right.
Or any like missing insulation in the walls and such.
And what about this exterior wall here? Anything?
No, so this right here means it's all good. Insulation is all fine. Otherwise, if we've seen like a big block of blue, that means that area there has no insulation and
or water behind there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Good to know. Okay, awesome. Well, Jimmy, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate
You're welcome.
it. Some great information. Hopefully people got some value out of it. If people need to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
They can call us at 604-222-0305.
Okay.
And for our social media crowd, they can get on me at Instagram at InspectedByJimmy.
Awesome. And I know you're big on Instagram, so it's a great account. You're going to want to follow it. So all the best. Have a great day, and go inspect some houses.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scott.